The gun was inches from the child's head. 7-year-old Emma Richardson sat frozen in her pink dress, tears streaming down her face. Around her, 21 other passengers pressed against the walls of the Mediterranean lounge, hands zip-tied behind their backs. It was 3:17 p.m. on June 14, 1994, and the luxury cruise liner Pacific Dream was 73 miles from any coastline. The man holding the pistol, Marcus Viper Jennings, had made his demands clear 2 hours ago. $5 million in unmarked bills delivered by helicopter within 6 hours, or he would execute one hostage every 30 minutes, starting with the youngest. The Coast Guard had surrounded the ship with 3 vessels. FBI hostage rescue team was inbound by chopper. But none of that mattered to Emma, whose small body shook as Viper pressed the cold barrel harder against her temple. Her mother screamed from across the room. That scream carried through the ship's communication system directly to the command center on the Coast Guard cutter 200 yards away, where FBI Special Agent Daniel Cross heard it through his headset and felt his stomach drop. Cross had negotiated 47 hostage situations in his 12-year career. He had never lost a child. The clock on the wall read 3:18 p.m. The deadline was 3:30. 12 minutes to save 22 lives. Subscribe now and leave in the comments. What city are you watching from? 24 hours earlier, the Pacific Dream had departed from Miami with 370 passengers aboard, heading for a 7-day Caribbean cruise. It was the ship's maiden voyage after a $15 million renovation. The Mediterranean lounge on Deck 9 was the crown jewel, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, marble floors, and a grand piano in the corner. That Tuesday morning, June 13th, Emma Richardson sat at that piano picking out the notes to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star while her mother Jennifer watched from a nearby table. Jennifer, 32, was a single mom from Denver who had saved for 3 years to afford this trip. At the bar, Robert Chen, a retired mechanical engineer from San Francisco, sipped coffee and read the morning newspaper. Sarah Martinez, a 24-year-old medical student from Houston, studied anatomy flashcards near the windows. David Thompson, a corporate attorney from Chicago, worked on his laptop despite being on vacation. Lisa Grant and her husband Michael, high school teachers from Portland, played cards at a corner table. There were 16 other passengers scattered throughout the lounge that morning, all enjoying the perfect weather and calm seas. None of them noticed the 3 crew members who entered at 10:45 a.m. carrying toolboxes. The crew uniforms looked authentic. The identification badges clipped to their shirts seemed legitimate. But Marcus Jennings, Tommy Snake Cruz, and Eddie Hawk Reeves were not ship employees. They were career criminals who had spent 8 months planning this operation. At exactly 11 a.m., as most passengers gathered for the lunch buffet on Deck 6, Jennings locked the main doors to the Mediterranean lounge from the inside. Snake pulled a 9mm handgun from his toolbox. Hawk produced zip ties and duct tape. The 22 passengers who happened to be in that lounge at that moment became hostages. Jennifer Richardson's scream when she saw the gun was cut short by Hawk's hand over her mouth. Emma dropped to the floor crying. Robert Chen stood up and Jennings hit him across the face with his pistol, dropping the old man instantly. Blood ran from Chen's split lip. Sarah Martinez, the medical student, moved instinctively toward Chen to help him, but Snake grabbed her arm and threw her against the wall. Within 90 seconds, all 22 hostages were on their knees with their hands behind their backs. Snake moved through the group with zip ties, securing each person's wrists tightly. Several passengers were crying. Michael Grant tried to speak and Jennings kicked him in the ribs. The message was clear: silence or violence. By 11:15, Jennings had used the lounge phone to call the ship's bridge. Captain William Foster answered. Jennings spoke calmly and clearly. He had 22 hostages. He had weapons and explosives. He wanted $5 million in cash delivered by helicopter to the ship's helipad by 5 p.m. If his demands were not met, he would begin executing hostages. The captain tried to negotiate, but Jennings cut him off. 5 million, 5 p.m. Those were the only terms. Then Jennings smashed the phone handset against the wall, destroying it. The ship's security team, consisting of 4 unarmed officers, positioned themselves outside the lounge doors, but could do nothing without risking the hostages. Captain Foster immediately radioed the Coast Guard. By 11:45, the nearest Coast Guard cutter was steaming toward their position at maximum speed. The FBI was notified. Special Agent Daniel Cross was eating lunch at his desk in the Miami field office when his supervisor called him. Cross, 41 years old, had built his reputation on patience and psychology. He was known for talking his way through situations other agents wanted to resolve with force. He had studied criminal behavior at Quantico, had a master's degree in psychology, and believed that every hostage-taker wanted something beyond their stated demands. His job was to figure out what that something was. By 1:30 p.m., Cross was airborne in a Coast Guard helicopter heading toward the Pacific Dream. The helicopter touched down on the Coast Guard cutter at 2:20 p.m. Cross was briefed immediately. 3 suspects. 22 hostages, including a 7-year-old girl. Demands for $5 million. No communication since the initial call. The ship's captain had agreed to maintain course and speed to avoid alarming the suspects. Cross set up his command center in the cutter's communication room. His first call to the ship's bridge went through at 2:35 p.m. Captain Foster patched the line through to the Mediterranean Lounge's emergency speaker system. Cross heard the connection click open. He could hear crying in the background, a child whimpering, then a man's voice, hard and flat. Jennings. Cross introduced himself calmly. He explained he was there to help resolve the situation safely. Jennings laughed. The only resolution was $5 million. Cross asked to speak with the hostages to verify their condition. Jennings refused. Cross asked if anyone needed medical attention. Jennings said not yet, but that could change. Cross noted the implied threat. He kept his voice steady and asked what Jennings needed to make everyone comfortable while they worked toward a resolution. Jennings said he needed the FBI to shut up and get the money. Then the line went dead. Jennings had cut the connection. Cross sat back in his chair and reviewed what he knew. 3 suspects. That was unusual. Most hostage situations involved either a lone actor or a larger group. 3 suggested a professional crew, but also potential for disagreement among them. The $5 million demand was specific, suggesting planning rather than impulse. The choice of a cruise ship in international waters showed sophistication. These were not amateurs. But even professionals made mistakes when stress escalated. Cross's strategy would be to stretch out time, build rapport, and look for fractures in the group dynamic. At 3 p.m., Cross called again. This time, Snake answered. His voice was younger, more aggressive than Jennings. Cross adjusted his approach. He spoke to Snake with more deference, acknowledged the difficulty of the situation, offered food and water for the hostages. Snake said they had plenty of food in the lounge. Cross asked about the child. Was she okay? Snake hesitated. In that hesitation, Cross heard something. Discomfort, maybe. Snake said the kid was fine. Cross said he had a daughter about that age and knew how scared children could get. Snake's voice hardened. He said Cross should focus on getting the money and stop trying to play mind games. Then Snake hung up. Cross made notes. Snake was less controlled than Jennings, possibly more volatile. The mention of Emma had created a reaction. That was a pressure point. At 3:15, Cross's supervisor called from Miami. The FBI could not and would not deliver $5 million to hostage takers. That was policy. But they needed to buy time until the hostage rescue team arrived. The HRT chopper was still 90 minutes out. Cross had to keep the situation stable until backup arrived. He called the ship again at 3:17. This time Jennings answered, and he was angry. He said Cross was wasting time. The deadline was 5 p.m. It was now 3:17. In 1 hour, 43 minutes, people would start dying if the money did not arrive. Cross tried to speak, but Jennings talked over him. Jennings said to prove he was serious, he was going to give a demonstration. Cross heard movement, heard Emma scream, heard Jennifer Richardson screaming for her daughter. Cross stood up from his chair, his heart pounding. He shouted into the phone to wait, to stop, that they were working on the money. Jennings said they had until 3:30 to show good faith. 30 minutes was the new deadline, not for the money but for proof the money was coming. A helicopter in the air. Official confirmation. Something real. Or the girl died first. The line went dead. Cross looked at the clock. 3:18 p.m., 12 minutes. His supervisor was already on another line talking to Washington. There was no way to get $5 million authorized and loaded onto a helicopter in 12 minutes. Cross knew that. Jennings probably knew that too, which meant this was not really about the money. This was about control, about making the FBI dance. Cross made a decision. He called the ship again. 3:19 p.m. Jennings answered. Cross spoke quickly. He said a helicopter was being prepared now. The money was being gathered. But these things took time, and he needed Jennings to understand the FBI was moving as fast as physically possible. Jennings said he did not care about the FBI's problems. Cross said hurting the girl would not speed anything up, but would guarantee that no deal could be made. Jennings said maybe that was fine. Maybe he did not care about deals anymore. Cross heard something in Jennings's voice. Fatigue. Stress. The man was starting to fray. Cross pressed gently. He said Jennings sounded tired. Asked how long he had been planning this operation. Jennings said long enough. Cross said it must be exhausting holding it all together. 3 people managing 22 hostages in a locked room for hours. That was a lot of pressure. Jennings went quiet. Cross waited. In hostage negotiation, silence was a tool. People felt compelled to fill it. After 15 seconds, Jennings spoke again. He said Cross did not know anything about pressure. Cross said, maybe not, but he knew about trying to control a situation when everything was going wrong. He knew what it felt like when plans did not work out. Jennings laughed bitterly. He said plans were working fine. Cross said if plans were working fine, they would not be having this conversation. Something had gone sideways. Cross could hear it in Jennings' voice. The clock read 3:24. 6 minutes until the deadline. Cross took a breath and made his play. He said he wanted to help Jennings get out of this situation alive and free, but first they needed to get past this moment. He asked what Jennings really needed right now, not the money. Right now, this minute. Jennings was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he needed Cross to understand he was serious. Cross said he understood completely. Jennings said no, Cross did not understand, because the FBI always thought they could talk their way out of everything. Cross said talking was better than shooting. Jennings agreed, which was why he was going to fire one shot into the ceiling at 3:30 if he did not have proof a helicopter was coming, not at the girl, into the ceiling, to prove he had weapons and was willing to use them. Cross felt relief flood through him. A shot into the ceiling was nothing. That was Jennings backing down while saving face. Cross said he appreciated that gesture of good faith, and in return he would make sure Jennings saw a helicopter in the air within the hour. Jennings said it better be carrying money. Cross said they would work on that, but first everyone needed to take a breath and slow down. The deadline passed at 3:30. At 3:32, Jennings fired a single shot into the ornate ceiling of the Mediterranean lounge. Plaster rained down. Emma Richardson screamed, but no one was hurt. Cross heard the shot through the open phone line. He marked it as progress. For the next hour, Cross maintained regular contact with Jennings. Short calls every 15 minutes, building rapport slowly. At 4 p.m., the hostage rescue team helicopter came into view. Jennings saw it through the lounge windows and called Cross immediately. He demanded to know if that was his money. Cross said it was the response team, but no money yet. Jennings exploded. He said Cross had lied to him. Cross stayed calm. He said he had promised a helicopter and there was a helicopter. He had never promised it would be carrying cash in the first hour. These things took coordination. Jennings said he was done with coordination. New deadline, 5 p.m. Final deadline, or people died. Cross knew the next phase was critical. The hostage rescue team was now on the Coast Guard cutter, setting up for a potential breach. But breaching a room with 22 hostages and 3 armed suspects was a nightmare scenario. The casualty rate would be catastrophic. Cross needed another option. At 4:20 p.m., he called Jennings again. This time he changed tactics. He said he wanted to speak to Snake or Hawk. Jennings asked why. Cross said because for the last 3 hours, he had only dealt with Jennings, and he wanted to make sure everyone in that room was on the same page. Jennings hesitated. Then Snake got on the line. Cross asked Snake how he was holding up. Snake said fine. Cross said managing 22 people in a confined space for 5 hours was not fine. It was exhausting. He asked if the hostages were getting restless. Snake admitted some of them were. The old guy Chen had been asking for his heart medication. The medical student Sarah had been trying to help him, but they would not let her move around. Cross asked if Snake had ever considered what happened after they got the money, how they would get off the ship, where they would go. Snake said they had a plan. Cross said he believed that, but plans made months ago sometimes looked different when you were living them in real time. He asked if this was how Snake thought it would feel. Snake was quiet. Then he said it did not matter how it felt. Cross said it mattered to him because he wanted Snake to survive this. Snake laughed. He said Cross wanted him in prison. Cross said he wanted him alive. Prison was better than dead. Snake hung up, but Cross had planted seeds. Doubt. Second thoughts. At 4:45, Cross called again and asked to speak with Hawk. Jennings refused. Cross heard arguing in the background. Muffled voices. Then the line went dead. At 4:50 p.m., something changed. The door to the Mediterranean lounge opened suddenly. Everyone expected hostages to be released or demands to be escalated. Instead, Hawk stumbled out into the hallway, his hands raised above his head. He was surrendering. The ship's security officers immediately tackled him and secured his hands. Within seconds, the information reached Cross on the cutter. 1 suspect in custody, 2 still inside with 22 hostages. Cross called the lounge. Jennings answered, and he was furious. He screamed that Hawk was a coward and a traitor. Cross asked what happened. Jennings said Hawk had lost his nerve. Said this was all going wrong. Said he did not sign up to kill kids. Cross seized the opportunity. He said Hawk made the smart choice. He asked if Jennings wanted to make the smart choice too. Jennings said he was not a quitter. Cross said it was not quitting. It was surviving. The FBI had 1 suspect in custody already. The ship was surrounded. There was no escape. But if Jennings released the hostages now and surrendered, he would live. He could fight his case in court. He could see his family again someday. Jennings went quiet. Cross could hear Snake in the background saying they should stick to the plan. Jennings told Snake to shut up. Then Jennings spoke to Cross. He said if he surrendered, what kind of sentence was he looking at? Cross said he could not make promises about sentencing, but cooperation always mattered. Taking a hostage was serious, but no one had been killed. That counted for something. Jennings asked about the $5 million. Cross said there was never going to be $5 million. Jennings had to know that. Jennings was quiet for a long time. Then he said, yeah, he knew. He had always known. At 5:15 p.m., the door to the Mediterranean lounge opened again. This time, Jennings walked out first, hands on his head. Snake followed 30 seconds later. Both men were taken into custody without resistance. The hostages remained inside, too traumatized to move until FBI agents and ship security entered and began cutting the zip ties from their wrists. Emma Richardson ran to her mother. Robert Chen was helped to his feet and given his medication. Sarah Martinez worked with the ship's medical staff to check each hostage for injuries, cuts and bruises, psychological trauma. But everyone was alive. Cross boarded the ship by helicopter at 5:45 p.m. He met with each hostage personally. He spoke with Emma, crouching down to her level, telling her she was brave. He thanked Jennifer for staying calm. He shook Robert Chen's hand. By 7 p.m., the 3 suspects were in Coast Guard custody, being transported back to Miami. Jennings, Cruz, and Reeves were all charged with hostage-taking, kidnapping, weapons violations, and terrorist threats. At trial 8 months later, all 3 men were convicted. Jennings received 25 years in federal prison. Cruz received 20 years. Reeves, who had surrendered first and cooperated with investigators, received 15 years. The 22 hostages all survived without serious physical injury. Most required counseling for months afterward. Emma Richardson had nightmares for 2 years, but eventually recovered. Jennifer Richardson later testified before Congress about the need for better security on cruise ships. The Pacific Dream completed its voyage to the Caribbean and returned to service after a 3-week investigation. The Mediterranean lounge was renovated and reopened. Special Agent Daniel Cross received a commendation from the FBI director for his handling of the crisis. He continued working hostage negotiations for another 12 years, before retiring in 2006. In interviews, Cross always said the same thing. The goal was never to win, it was to bring everyone home alive. On June 14, 1994, he did exactly that. Subscribe now and leave in the comments. What city are you watching from?